My parents abandoned me with my siblings at 12. Then they called CPS on me for raising them. I don't remember the last time my mom cooked dinner. I was 12 the first time I realized I might be raising my siblings on my own. Not for a night, not for a weekend, but for real. I came home from school that day to a sticky note on the fridge that said, "Out late, use leftovers." There were no leftovers, just a half-empty jar of peanut butter and a bruised banana. Lily was 4 at the time. Jamie was 6. Neither of them could reach the microwave, and both were already used to me tying their shoes, brushing their hair, and checking their homework. They didn't ask where mom was. They didn't ask when dad would be back. They already knew. Before that, it was slow. The kind of abandonment you don't notice right away because it wears a friendly face. My mom used to be around, loud, dramatic, weirdly obsessed with vision boards. She was always chasing something. First it was real estate, then it was luxury skincare. Then it was some abundance coach she found on Facebook who convinced her to release all attachment to expectation, which I guess included her children. My dad, he worked construction. Until he didn't. Then he started consulting, which was just a fancy way of saying he moved in with his new girlfriend and occasionally dropped off envelopes of guilt-stained cash. I wasn't stupid. I saw how things were falling apart. I just didn't expect it to be me left holding all the pieces. It started small, packing lunches, filling out permission slips, reading bedtime stories, waking up early to braid Lily's hair before school. Then it got bigger. Jamie got strep throat and needed antibiotics. Mom said she'd be home by dinner. She showed up 2 days later smelling like hotel soap and vodka. That was the last time I asked her for help. Bills piled up. I started calling the power company, pretending to be my dad, saying he was overseas. I learned to stretch $40 across a week of groceries. Cereal for dinner wasn't just a joke, it was survival. There were days when I skipped school just to make sure Lily got to daycare, and Jamie didn't forget his backpack. By the time I turned 13, no one was checking if I went to class anyway. Our neighbor, Mrs. Colburn, figured something was off. She started leaving extra bags of groceries on our porch. Never asking questions, never knocking, just kindness in plastic bags. Once she offered to call someone for us. I lied and said everything was fine. Why? Because the truth would have meant social workers, separation, maybe foster homes. And I wasn't letting anyone take Lily and Jamie from me. I didn't care how bad it got. I was all they had. One night, Jamie fell down the stairs and split his lip. He was crying, blood running down his chin, and I was shaking. Not from fear of the injury, but from the idea of what might happen if we went to the ER and someone asked questions. So I cleaned him up at home, watched 3 YouTube videos on butterfly bandages, and made him a popsicle from frozen Gatorade. He smiled, told me I was better than any doctor. I cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. I got a job sweeping up at a local mechanic shop. The owner, Gus, paid me in cash under the table. He never asked how old I was. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't care. He'd slip me extra bills on weekends and say things like, "Feed your crew." I think he figured it out eventually, but he never said anything. Every dime went toward diapers, school shoes, ramen noodles, and secondhand uniforms. At school, teachers gave up on me. I was always late, barely awake, missing homework. No one ever dug deeper. They just called me lazy. I didn't have the energy to explain that I'd been up since 5 a.m. making sure my sister had a clean shirt and my brother remembered his inhaler. My grades tanked, but Jamie was reading above his level, and Lily was counting to 50 before kindergarten. That was the report card I cared about. When I was 14, the landlord came banging on the door asking for rent. I lied and said my dad was in the hospital. She didn't believe me, but I think she pitied me enough to back off for a few months. Eventually, I started using my dad's old email to apply for benefits. It was illegal, probably, but it kept us in our apartment. I forged his signature on school forms and made up fake excuses for parent-teacher nights.
I was so used to lying, it didn't even register as wrong anymore. It was just survival. Every birthday, I baked cakes out of pancake mix and melted chocolate bars. I wrapped dollar store toys in old newspapers. And every time Jamie and Lily smiled and said, "Best birthday ever," my chest would ache with this weird mix of pride and heartbreak. They didn't know what they were missing, and I wasn't about to tell them.
For 5 years, we made it work. Not perfectly, but we were together, safe, fed, loved. Then, when I was 17 and legally an adult, the people who abandoned us decided they wanted back in. Not with hugs or apologies, with lawyers and a CPS case. If you're not following our channel, you might never see it again. But if you're subscribed and use the bell, congratulations. You'll always have access to the most interesting stories. Whenever you want to watch and listen,
It was supposed to be just another Tuesday. Lily had a field trip that day, and I remember helping her pack a sandwich shaped like a bear because she said her friends liked it better that way. Jamie was reading a book on dinosaurs and begging me to let him bring it to school, even though he had already been warned once for reading during math. Normal stuff. Then, around 3:20 p.m., as I was wiping the counter and trying to figure out if I could make spaghetti stretch for another night, there was a knock at the door. Not the casual neighbor knock. This was official. Sharp. Like the kind that comes with bad news. When I opened it, there were two strangers on my porch. One man, one woman, with crisp folders and government badges clipped to their jackets. "Are you Theo Walters?" the woman asked. My throat tightened. "Yeah, we're with Child Protective Services. We need to talk." I knew the game was up. I'd been running this operation for 5 years, holding it together with duct tape and instinct, and I always knew there'd be a knock someday. I just didn't expect it to come after everything had already started to feel okay. What I didn't expect even more, my parents were in the car, sitting there behind the glass. My mom was looking at her nails like this was an appointment she was late to. My dad, who I hadn't seen in over 2 years, was talking on the phone like this wasn't the most important moment of my life. I could barely speak. What's this about?" The woman gave a practiced, gentle smile, the kind they probably teach you in mandatory training. "Your parents have raised concerns about the safety of your siblings. We'd like to speak with all of you." They used phrases like unlicensed guardian and inappropriate supervision. And suddenly, everything I had sacrificed was being flipped into a weapon. I wasn't protecting anymore, I was interfering. They asked if the kids had their own beds, if I had legal guardianship, if there had ever been any incidents. My hands shook as I handed over my carefully kept folders, school records, immunizations, signed notes from doctors, even receipts for groceries. "Your organization is saying I'm not a fit guardian. But I've been the only guardian for years. Where were they?" The woman didn't answer. The man asked, "Can you tell us why your parents weren't living here?" I didn't even know where to start.
they interviewed Lily and Jaime in private. I sat on the couch gripping my knees so hard they hurt. I wasn't worried about what my siblings would say. I was worried about how they would twist it. Because Jaime loved telling stories, and Lily tended to repeat phrases from cartoons, I imagined the worst. "They sleep in my room" could become, "We don't have enough beds." "I help cook dinner" could become, "I have to cook because no adult does." An hour later, they came out, their expressions unreadable. "We're not removing them," the woman said, "but a formal custody case has been filed." "By who?" I snapped. "Them?" I pointed toward the car, where my parents still hadn't gotten out. "They've expressed the desire to be more involved," she said carefully. "After 5 years of silence," I muttered. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the edge of my mattress, looking over at Lily and Jaime, curled up like nothing had changed. But everything had. Now there was a case number, a file, a target on my back. I called Gus, my boss at the auto shop, and asked if he knew any lawyers. He gave me a number.
I called Aunt Maya next. She wasn't technically related. She was my mom's second cousin's ex-wife, but she'd always been kind. She said I could list her as an emergency contact. "Tell me the truth," she said. "Is this bad?" "I don't know," I whispered, "but I'm scared." 2 weeks later, I walked into family court for the first time. My mom wore a bright pink blazer. My dad brought a lawyer. They both waved like this was a class reunion and not a custody hearing. They claimed I had interfered in their parental rights, that I had alienated the children, that I was using them for benefits. They haven't seen their children in years, the judge said. Why now? Their lawyer responded, because he was hiding them. I felt my blood go cold. The kids were brought in separately. Lily held her stuffed bunny so tightly its ear ripped during the interview. Jaime said one sentence I'll never forget. "I don't want to go with them. They didn't even call me on my birthday." The judge didn't make a decision that day. CPS was told to conduct a full assessment. Background checks, home visits, school reviews, every inch of my life was now under a microscope. And my parents? They started showing up, not for love, but for leverage. Suddenly, there were birthday gifts and phone calls and awkward Sunday visits where my mom tried to feed Jaime candy, and my dad kept asking Lily, "Do you remember when we went to the zoo?" She didn't, because we'd never gone. That memory was a lie. And through all of it, I had to stay calm, stay perfect, because one wrong move, one missed rent payment or angry outburst, and they'd paint me as unfit. I'd survived being 12 and raising a family. Now I had to survive the people who left, pretending they wanted us back. Before we go further, don't forget to like this story, hit subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. By the time the second court hearing rolled around, I'd aged 10 years emotionally, but legally, I was still just a kid in the eyes of the system. "They're not saying you did anything wrong," my lawyer said. "They're saying you're not supposed to be the one doing it." That sentence haunted me. So what if I'd kept my siblings fed, safe, enrolled in school, loved? If I didn't have a piece of paper, I wasn't legit. It didn't matter that I was the only constant in their lives. CPS had done a home visit by then. They took pictures of our apartment, the bunk bed I built from scratch with YouTube tutorials, the chore charts, the emergency contacts taped on the fridge. They asked if the kids had their own toothbrushes, if we had fire alarms, if I could name their pediatrician. I answered everything. Showed them receipts, report cards, meal plans. I lived for this. But still, their tone had shifted. More neutral, more cold. One of them glanced at my work boots by the door and said, "And how many hours a week are you working?" I knew what they were thinking. He's not at home enough, he's overwhelmed, he's just a kid. Meanwhile, my parents started showing up to school events. They'd never come to a single parent-teacher conference when they were actually responsible. But now, suddenly my mom was at Jaime's class play, waving from the second row like she'd been there all along. My dad brought Lily a pink backpack. She didn't even want it. It wasn't her favorite color. But CPS saw that. They saw what looked like effort. They didn't see the panic attack Lily had after the play, or how Jaime refused to use the backpack and asked if he could give it away to someone who actually needs it. They kept showing up. Sometimes they'd bring gifts. Sometimes they'd bring questions. "Do you guys want to visit us next weekend? Wouldn't it be fun to stay with your real parents?" And slowly, I could see it working. Not because the kids were being swayed, but because the system wanted to believe in redemption, wanted to believe parents could change, wanted to believe blood mattered more than consistency. During one visit, my mom said something to Jaime that made my stomach drop. "We'll get your room back to how you like it. Maybe a bunk bed. Remember those?" He blinked at her, like she hadn't heard him, or like she didn't care. I started to unravel. One night I broke down after the kids went to bed. I called Aunt Maya and said, "I'm scared they're going to win. Not because they're right, but because they showed up late and the court thinks that counts." She said something I'll never forget. "You were always the adult, Theo, even when you were 12. But now you need to fight like one. Not just for them, but for you." So I started writing it all down. Every missed call, every school event they skipped, every time Lily had night terrors after a visit, every time Jaime clammed up for 2 days because Dad asked if he still loved him. I wrote it all down. And when the third court date came, I brought the truth with me. I wasn't supposed to talk. That's what my lawyer said. You're just here to observe. The focus is on the children today. But as soon as the judge asked if anyone had something to add, I stood up, and I told them everything. I was 12, I said. 12 when I started waking up at 5 to pack school lunches and walk my siblings to daycare. The courtroom went quiet. My mom was running some online business, and my dad had moved on. They left us. There were no babysitters, no goodbyes, just a fridge full of expired yogurt and 2 terrified kids who thought I could fix it all. The judge leaned forward. I could feel my parents squirming in their seats. I signed report cards, learned how to make dinner on a hot plate. I worked weekends at a mechanic's shop under the table to keep the lights on. My voice cracked, but I kept going. I know I'm not their dad, but I was the one who held them when they cried. I'm the one who remembered birthdays. I taught Jaime how to ride a bike. I stayed up all night with Lily when she had strep. They called me dad once. I didn't correct them. At that point, Jaime was crying quietly. Lily had her arms crossed, angry, hurt, exhausted in a way no 5-year-old should be. My parents were silent, and for once, they weren't performing. They looked small. Not guilty, just exposed. The judge asked them one question. Why now? And my dad gave the worst answer imaginable. He said, we didn't realize how serious things had gotten. Didn't realize? We had been surviving without them for 5 years. My mom tried to clean it up with some speech about needing time to heal and missing her babies, but even the judge's expression shifted. You could tell he didn't buy it anymore.
When court adjourned that day, I didn't win. Not yet. But I saw it in the room. Something cracked. Not just in the judge's view, but in Jaime and Lily too. Because after we walked out, Jaime grabbed my hand and said, "You're not gonna let them take us, right?" And Lily whispered, "Can we go home now?" I'd never felt more terrified, or more certain. I wasn't just fighting for them anymore, I was fighting with them. And we were gonna finish this together. I thought the worst was behind us. We'd made it through CPS visits, courtroom interrogations, half-truths and fake apologies from people who only remembered they had kids when it was convenient. But 2 weeks before the final custody hearing, I got a call from the school. Apparently, my dad had listed himself as Jaime's emergency contact, without my knowledge, without permission. And that day, when Jaime complained of a stomachache, they called him, and he picked Jaime up. For 3 hours, I couldn't breathe. I called the school, the district, every number I could think of. When I finally got a hold of my dad, he was offended. It was just a couple of hours, he said, like I was the problem. He said he wanted to see my place. You don't have a place in his life, I said, shaking with fury. You're just being dramatic, he snapped. They're our kids. No, I said. They're mine now. I filed an emergency report with the court the next morning. My lawyer was livid. CPS was concerned, but their tone was still maddeningly neutral. They technically have visitation rights, they said. But they don't have the right to take them out of school without telling me, I argued. This is coercion. They're trying to undermine everything. The worst part? Jaime came home confused. He said, "You said I could go," he mumbled, eyes low. Did I mess up? I hugged him tighter than I ever had. Nobody, you didn't mess up. They did. Lily was quieter after that. She stopped drawing smiley faces, stopped humming when she colored. One night I heard her whispering to her stuffed bunny, "What if they take us away?" It broke me. These kids had already been abandoned once. Now they were being weaponized in some twisted redemption arc no one asked for. In court that week, my lawyer submitted the report. We presented call logs, school statements, even a short note Jaime had scribbled that said, "I didn't want to go, but he said you said I should." And then the real twist came. CPS admitted they'd been reviewing my parents' financial background and discovered they'd recently attempted to open a bank account using Jaime's social security number. Identity fraud. On their own kid. When the judge asked them about it,
My mom stammered something about a misunderstanding. My dad tried to blame it on a paperwork mix-up. But no one was buying it anymore, especially not me. The judge called for one final evaluation before the ruling. I was exhausted. I felt like I'd been holding my breath for years. But I looked at Lily and Jaime, and I remembered what I was fighting for. They weren't trophies. They were my family. They were my kids. The courtroom was packed, not with press, not with strangers, just us. My parents stiff and expressionless in their corner, CPS quiet but observant, me holding Lily's favorite stuffed bunny in my hands like a lucky charm. Jaime sat beside me, biting his nails and looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. This was it. The judge came in, glasses low on his nose, a file in his hand thicker than any school book I'd ever read. I'd stared at that file for weeks. Every page inside had our life printed in it. Every moment we struggled, survived, and stitched ourselves into something that resembled family. After reviewing the latest findings, the judge began, including school reports, home evaluations, and additional concerns regarding the petitioner's conduct. He paused, long enough for me to feel my pulse in my ears. I am ruling in favor of Theo Walters to retain permanent legal guardianship of Lily and Jaime Walters. I didn't breathe, not for 5 whole seconds. Lily let out a tiny yes, and Jaime immediately grabbed my arm. I felt tears slip down my face before I even realized I was crying. The judge continued, explaining that my parents' rights would be restricted heavily. No unsupervised visits, no school pickups, no overnight custody. CPS would close their case unless further action was warranted. My parents didn't react at first. They just sat there. Then my mom stood up, loudly, and said, "This is ridiculous. He's not even 20. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Yet he's done more for these children than you have in the last 7 years. Security didn't have to escort them out, but it was close. Outside the courtroom, Jaime asked me if we were going to have pizza that night. Like that verdict had just changed our lives. I laughed. "We can get whatever you want." Lily tugged my sleeve and said, "Does this mean we're staying with you forever?" I knelt down and said, "You were always staying with me. I just had to prove it to the people who didn't know us yet." That night, we did get pizza. We lit candles, not because the lights were out. For once, the bills were paid, but because it felt like a celebration. We toasted with root beer in mismatched mugs and stayed up way too late watching cartoons. The next morning, I let them sleep in. No alarms, no rush, just peace. And me? I slept too. Really slept. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to listen for footsteps or phone calls or knocks on the door. No one was coming to take them. No one was coming to tell me I wasn't enough. Weeks passed, then months. I got promoted at the auto shop. Gus gave me a raise and said, "About time the boss was someone who could run a household better than half the dads I know." Lily started gymnastics, Jaime got into the advanced reading program, and every time a form came home from school asking for parent-guardian signature, I signed it without holding my breath. We still have bad days. Sometimes Jaime asks why our parents didn't fight for us before. Sometimes Lily says she had a dream they came back and took her. But those moments are fewer now, softer, and I remind them they're not alone. We're not a perfect family, but we're ours. And as for me, I used to think I lost my childhood, but now I think I just grew up faster. And in that space, I built something stronger than most people ever get. Not because I had to, because I chose to.
If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it too. Also, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? What city and country? And have you or someone you know ever been through something like this?